All right. Well, Jon and Kristin, both of you, thanks for taking the time to do this today and spend a few minutes talking just about the Sedgwick experience with COVID-19. I was hoping that we would start maybe most broadly. I know that Sedgwick has lots of different clients, lots of different client operations. You've got a really broad span. So across all of Sedgwick, what are you hearing? What kind of challenges are you hearing with all those clients and all those different operations that you have? What's going on in your world?
So from a Midwest pooling perspective, we're really focused right now on helping clients get back into their offices, their operations. We're really concerned with and focusing upon risk control initiatives, both for our non-pooling clients as well as our pooling clients. They're really concerned right now in getting employees back to work and how they can effectively and safely do that. They know that this is going to be a threat. This is going to be a marathon and it's not a sprint. So they're kind of gearing up, and we're providing them some tools to safely do that, whether it's PPE equipment, how they can clean their surfaces, how they can social distance, how they can get their employees back into the work and or handle citizens as they're going back into the workplace, and how to effectively handle those situations. Another concern we've had lastly is remote employees and how they're dealing with and how they're faring and working remotely. Managers managing employees they're not used to managing. Isolation issues have also been a concern, as well as some depression issues. We have young parents that are trying to be productive and do the best that they can, but they have, little children that they're taking care of at the same time. So those are just some of the challenges that we're seeing from a Midwest perspective with our pooling clients. Jon, what do you see in California?
Wholeheartedly agree. I would just add to that, most of our clients are on a fiscal year, so we're rapidly going into budgeting, trying to figure out what the impacts of the hard liability and property market are, what presumption may mean in California, and what the impacts are on workers' compensation. And then, adding to all that, what this new economic environment really looks like in terms of taking into consideration investment rates of return and discount factors, and how do we budget appropriately for this new fiscal year, both inbound contribution revenues as well as just some of the underlying assumptions that we've made historically on our budgeting process.
As we talk more specifically about those public entity pooling clients and what you're seeing in them, Jon, that comment about sort of what you're seeing with not just the COVID-19 issues, but presumption issues and other sorts of related, I guess those are intertwined, presumption and COVID-19 in some cases. We always talk about, or often talk about, California being an entity unto itself and some of the experiences being different. Do you see that playing out now? Are there differences that you're seeing and experiencing in California than you think are maybe felt elsewhere?
I think one of the things that's different in California right now is not just is not from a COVID perspective as much as we're trying not to lose sight of other massive issues that we've been dealing with over the last year. We've had an enormous negative impact from wildfire, as everybody knows, in California. The property market has not gotten any better because of COVID. The insurers, the excess insurers, reinsurers have not forgotten about that exposure. So we're having really challenging times putting together property programs that are as encompassing. We have some growing concern about furloughs and layoffs and reduced time from a maintenance and operations perspective in terms of taking care of our facilities, making sure that they are wildfire proofed to the extent that we can. And then I would also add to that, SAM came in earnest in California January 1st with some retroactive legislation where we effectively have an open 3-year reporting window with no statute of limitations. And the last actuarial review I saw on that was that we, as a public agency marketplace, are going to take north of $500 million in unfunded sexual abuse and molestation liability claims. Those are enormous impacts. So it's really, I would say, challenging in California, particularly, to not become COVID-19 obsessed and lose sight of some other huge industry issues that we're trying to face right now.
Yeah, I totally echo Jon's comments. We're seeing SAM cases trying to tighten language, working with reinsurers to do that in order to limit the occurrences and the perpetrators, and the statute of limitations across the country is really continuing to be a challenge. So on top of COVID-19, I think it's really important to still focus on those national issues, as well as the national cyber breach issues that we're having nationwide. Those are still continuing to be a concern, whether we're working from home from a COVID-19 situation or we're continuing to work in the workplace. So those are efforts, and I think those have to stay in place whether COVID-19 is in the works or not. So I think it's important to focus on both challenges.
Yeah, an important reminder just that, you know, those issues don't go away just because we're doing what we're doing with COVID-19. So what about more specifically those public entity pooling clients? What are you seeing, hearing, experiencing there?
Do you want me to take it, Jon? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Sure. So pools, you know, from a pools perspective, we're obviously going to see a decrease in claims, I think is what we're going to see from a pooling perspective. You know, on the liability claims, as businesses are closed, towns are closed, you know, those people are not walking out and about for premises liability cases. They're not traveling in their cars, less AL claims. You know, the police isn't involved with them quite as much. I think we're probably going to see a decrease in the amount of liability claims that we are seeing for this year and maybe into next year. You know, that's going to be a challenge. I think also is going to be a challenge is whether or not there's coverage for those business interruption those claims from a property perspective, whether they have sub-limits or they have no coverage. That's really going to be a challenge for our public entity and pooling clients. I also see from a revenue standpoint, it's going to be significantly reduced probably in 2020 into 2021. You know, swimming pools from a revenue standpoint are closing, child care centers, you know, all of those activities that they normally do during the summer months, their revenues are going to be reduced significantly, and that's going to be a significant impact, you know, on our public entity clients. So, you know, as we continue and they want to go back to work and visit those public buildings, they're going to have risk control measures, I think, in place in order to totally take care of some of those issues. And qualifying those exposures right now at this standpoint is really going to be a tough time. But what is certain, I think, from a pooling perspective, is they're going to be under some financial strains in this year and going into next year.
Are you thinking the pools or the underlying members, Kristin, or both?
Both of them are going to be from a reduced revenue standpoint from the members, as well as their budgets going into the poolings. And you know, as executive leaders and administrators, you know, it's very important, I think, to think through on how we're going to address those with whether it's the board of directors or the executive directors. There's been a lot of different pooling clients that we've dealt with, and they've handled and how they've served their membership in different ways. For instance, one allowed a grant for PPE equipment to be purchased. Another pool provided up to $120 per day for 10 days for quarantine for COVID purposes. Another one provided education for over 1,000 members. Perhaps another one returned a percentage of contribution back to the members. So it's really, I think, an important time to be flexible and rethink how we can do this in the pooling space because we are so unique and have that flexibility outside of insurance.
Yeah, I would agree on that. One of the interesting things to me, Kristin, that you said was about surplus, right? We've seen a dramatic increase in the interest in surplus utilization. But we've also seen most recently an abundance of caution about maybe not using it right this second, in expectation, like you said, that there's a lag in public entity member revenues, and they're anticipating some really tough years following not just 2020, but 2021, 2022, and are kind of earmarking some of that surplus of let's keep a war chest, let's keep our reserves high in case we really need it and are in some desperate situations in the coming years.
So Jon, that idea that there's this increased focus and interest in surplus, right? I think what you're describing is sort of a really great conversation. What's the highest and best use of fund balance or surplus? Is it now? Is it in the future? Is it through the pool, or is it distributing that surplus to members for them to use? Like, is that the kind of conversations that you are hearing and having about that most effective, efficient use of surplus?
We're having it more along the lines of, call it rate stabilization for future years. You know, California, again, may be in a little worse situation than some other places in that we have this hardening market going in this direction, not only because of some of the risks we talk about, but just general social inflation, verdicts, liability outcomes. So we're going this way in terms of costs, and member contributions or member revenues are going this way, right? So they have less money coming in and we need more money going out. And that's where we're trying to balance those curves. And, you know, to your point, using surplus maybe to stabilize rates is at the forefront, but not this year's rates. It seems like most of our public entity members can sustain this year. They're really worried about those two curves tilting more dramatically, and all of a sudden, you know, we're trying to go to members that are having their own financial troubles and say we need 30% more contributions because of the liability market and the circumstances that we're kind of incurring as we go along. It's we're all kind of very fortunate to be in a position that we are, right, which is in good shape now and safe and healthy and happy and all of those good things. But everybody's pretty wary about the next, you know, 2 or 3 years to come in terms of financial implications to individual public agencies in California.
Yeah, those are some important concerns. I don't know whether to call that good perspective or not. I guess it's mindful perspective, right, that we should have. Yeah.
Pragmatic? Would you take pragmatic?
Yeah, there we go. Pragmatic. So what about Sedgwick more specifically? I mean, you've got a lot of pools that you work with. You've got a lot of different services that you perform and offer and put together for those pools. You know, what are you looking at as ways that you can be of greatest help to the pools? What are you looking at, products or services or new ways of putting things together?
Sure. So, and from a litigation standpoint, you know, we have 11 attorneys across the United States that really help our claims and our high-end litigation management practice in general. You know, they're being pulled in for risk control perspective, also working with coverage counsel to provide some best practices from employment issues that in particular that we're dealing with COVID-19. So we're kind of using them in a multi-purpose way. They also work with a claim system with Sedgwick that we can code and we can properly track the duration and the total allotted LAE and indemnity and the duration of the claim, getting to the root cause, and perhaps use that analytical data to recommend a best practice if in the event that there is another pandemic situation that we're faced with. Those are kind of some insights from a litigation standpoint that they're also working with. From a risk control perspective, Sedgwick has over 40 risk control team members and colleagues, and they're working together with some best practices. And we also have 3 cyber breach specialists also that work with our members, whether they're remote working with them or providing video assistance right now. And working with a lot of this was working from home and grabbing their home computer or working and grabbing their desktop computer from their office. So a lot of those cyber breach measures have not been taken on those home computers sometimes. So just walking them through and making sure that those are safe and have the firewalls necessary and the proper protocols. Those are another resources that what we've been doing and how we've been serving the membership. In addition to that, our risk control team has been working on COVID-19 resources. You guys have provided from AGRiP a lot of great resources as well. We've been diving into those, so thank you, I appreciate that. And we're working on a disease outbreak plan to basically allow the public entities back into the workplace. So those are just some of the initiatives from a Sedgwick pooling perspective that we've been working on of late.
If I could add one, and that's one that we're really excited about. One of the harder questions that came from our membership was, well, how do we help our employees if they're diagnosed, if it's not a comp claim, right? How do we go through that process? So we were actually able to take advantage of Sedgwick's resources globally and offered nurse case management support to our public entity members, regardless of whether or not it's a workers' compensation claim, to be able to give somebody access to resources to ask questions, to make sure that they're getting proper care and treatment. So that was a really great one, because that gets really difficult for our constituents, in that they're not just worried about somebody being diagnosed with COVID-19 if it's comp. right? They're worried about their employees' well-being in general. So that was a really nice value-added service that we were able to release quite some time ago now, 3 or 4 weeks ago.
So does it function kind of like a single point of entry, right? It doesn't matter how or why, you just come, you get the nurse triage service, and then we segment it later into where it fits?
Yeah, as long as it's an employee of a member entity of one of our pools, 24/7 hotline, doesn't matter how or why they were diagnosed. Now we're actually able to take advantage of the pooling and use some of the funds towards that cost. It's not an expensive proposition, but it does have a cost attached to it. So the pools were willing to kick into that just to support their employee population and further enable people to get back to work.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. Kristin, you mentioned the risk management services and best practices and everything from cyber breach services to COVID-19 specific risk management. What are you seeing from your pool members? Is the demand for that loss control risk management training still there? Is it increased? Is it decreased a little bit? Just in general, what is that ask looking like from those pool members?
Yeah, it's been really great to see the use of our e-library in particular for all of our Midwest pools in general. We've seen a 76% uptick in the usage with some of the pools, so they're really using those resources. They're really diving in. I think they're really spending the time, and some of their managers are assigning them classes during this time at stay at home that they can effectively use some training. A couple of our members reached out to our risk control colleagues and working on some projects that they haven't had. There's a kind of an HR handbook builder, so they've been building out that. So there's some great resources in there. We've really seen an uptick, especially during the last 6 weeks, of the resources that have been used on that. Our COVID-19 obviously are getting a lot of attention right now, but outside of that, after they start using those resources, but then they're diving into some other HR and employment related resources as well.
It's pretty awesome, kind of taking advantage of some time and opportunity to do the broader training that is necessary.
Yeah, it's great to see. And as we see the usage coming more and more, it's exciting to report back to the boards of, the increased usage. It's a great thing to see. Time well spent for them, especially.
So is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you think would be important or timely or notable to share with kind of the broader public entity pooling community? Have you hit everything already, or is there anything else that comes to mind?
I mean, I have one, and it's a little more qualitative if you're open. We have a gentleman in our office who's been doing this for 35 years, and he had an interesting point, which is now more than ever is when our pools need us. Now is when they need us as executive directors and general managers to be leaders, to be subject matter experts, and to help support our pooling constituents and our pooling members. So just, it's easy to get sucked into this and for it to be a little bit doom and gloom and struggles from home and struggle with personal lives. But more than ever, I think this is a rewarding industry to be in, and, recognize that our membership needs us more than ever, and we have an enormous amount of value and can help guide them through this challenge, just like, the challenges that we've all seen in the past. So I'd just like to share the optimism about why we do self-insurance pooling and why we're all engaged in this. And it's, maybe reinforced to AGRiP's membership that now is the time for us to shine and really show our value.
Just a couple parting thoughts, and I think the resources necessary to get public entities back into the workplace is going to be really a overwhelming and monumental task, and how we can effectively and concisely and thoughtfully message that, I think, is going to be really important to the membership to provide that guidance. But just as important, I think, just lending an ear and continue that constant communication with the membership, and letting them know that we're here, or we can provide a resource or an avenue or even a contact to help alleviate some of the stress that they're going through, because this is just such an unprecedented time for them. And if we can just be there, whether it be lending an ear, like I said, or however we can serve them, at Sedgwick, taking care of people is the heart of what we do. And I think this is key, especially in these unprecedented times, to just be there for the membership and have an ear to lend and just be dedicated to our members.
So those are two pretty good reminders, right? One, just focus on being the resource and being accessible and providing the members what they need. And two, remembering the importance of leadership and reflecting that leadership value back. Those are two really, really strong and important reminders. So how are you guys doing that personally, right? I mean, you have to be able to walk into the virtual office every day ready to demonstrate some leadership. What are you doing to rejuvenate yourselves overnight or get ready to go for the next day in order to be able to present that?
Oh, do you want me to, let's see.
Go ahead, Jon.
Maybe random stream of thoughts. We're trying to remember to reach out to our own teams, right? Because you can get sucked in and just do email and work and projects, and to be really attuned to how other people on your teams are doing. And unfortunately, when you don't get to see them every day, you really need to make the extra effort to reach out, right? So we're trying to reach out more to our teams. We're trying to have a little bit more fun. We have a weekly meeting and we try and engage in some games and some giveaways and those types of things. So it's not just all drudgery. So trying to keep it light. I would say personally, reading a lot. I'm a headspace advocate, so a little bit, with the meditation apps, the yoga apps, whatever kind of personal support you can find that's probably not drinking related is positive right now.
Give up on all the memes about coffee and wine trade-offs. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
For sure.
Very good.
I have 3 teenager boys at home, Anne. So, looking at their messy bedrooms has been a struggle for me. So I've been giving them this little inspirational book. So late last week, as they're done with homework and schooling at 1 o'clock, and I think they should be continuing to go to 3 o'clock, I gave them this William McRaven book as How to Make Your Bed. I think most of us seen that speech at the graduation. But I literally am like, I cannot look at your bed one more time. So I've been giving them these inspirational books. But kind of your parting thought, I thought this book gave a really good parting comment that I think all of us can take away. Now, I've said this to my boys. So because they're sick of the COVID-19, they can't see their friends, yada, yada. Their lives are so boring and they complain constantly about it. But he quotes, and it's a cute little saying, "We will all find ourselves neck deep in mud someday. This is the time to sing loudly, to smile broadly, and lift up those around you and give them hope that tomorrow's going to be a better day." So as a mother, a working mother, and just out to you guys and the colleagues in the pooling community, I think we will get through this together. And if we can keep our heads up and smile on our face and plug through the groundhog day of day after day, I think we can get through this together.
Well, I cannot sum it up any better than that. That was perfect. A perfect way to end. Thank you for that, both of you, and thank you for taking the time today.
Thank you,
thank
Anne.
you.
We appreciate it.